Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another knitting tutorial. Today, we're going to learn how to knit a sock. This is a very basic top-down sock. Top-down meaning that we begin here at the cuff and we finish here at the toe. So, if you've never knit a sock before, you may want to start with my last video, which includes certain techniques that we will be using today. But if you are already familiar with these techniques, we can go ahead and get started. We are going to be knitting the second sock in this pair. So we can see here, we're going to start with a basic ribbed cuff. This is just 2x2 ribbing, 2 knit, 2 purl. We're going to move into this little lace pattern. We'll go into our heel flap and then our foot, where we will have our stockinette stitch sole, and we'll continue with our lace pattern on the top of the foot before we move to the stockinette stitch toe. This lace pattern I'm using is just from this book here, Sensational Knitted Socks by Charlene Church. This book has a whole lot of really great basic sock patterns. But these techniques that I'm showing you today, you could use for any sock. So it doesn't have to be this one. You could always simply do a cuff that's just ribbing, or you could do ribbing at the top and do stockinette, or you could do another pattern of your choice. It's entirely up to you. A sock is a very customizable thing. So let's put this aside for now and we'll get started. For our sock today, we're going to be using double pointed needles. There's a number of different ways you can knit socks. My preferred method is with double pointed needles, but you could also use a very small circular needle. You could use a larger circular needle and use the magic loop technique. But here we're just going to be using double pointed. You can kind of tell I use these ones a lot, they're a little bent. These particular needles are size 1. You probably can't see, the camera won't focus, but oh, there we go. So they're size 1 2.25 millimeter needles. You can knit a sock on really any needles you choose. Usually I use 1s, 1.5s, or 2s, depending on what I'm knitting. And here's our sock yarn. You can use any fingering weight or sock weight yarn you prefer. You'll need about 400 yards of it to knit a pair of socks. If you're knitting for a bigger person who has a larger foot, you might need a little more, or for smaller feet, you might need a little less. Here, we're going to be knitting for me. I wear about a women's size 9, so we'll be knitting that size. And I'll show you as we go what you can do to customize to fit the size foot you're knitting for. We're going to begin by casting on. And with every cast on, I like to make a slip knot. So we'll begin with our slip knot. And then we'll put our slip knot onto our first needle. I'm going to cast all of the stitches onto this one needle to start, and then we will distribute them across the rest of the needles. So for this cast on, I'm going to use the long tail cast on. It's my favorite method, and it works really well for socks if you're starting from the top, because it'll be a little stretchier. So we're going to cast on with the long tail method. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to continue casting on until I have 68 stitches on my needle for this particular sock. Okay, so now we have 68 stitches cast on to our needle, and now what we're going to do is distribute them. Since I have a pattern, both my ribbing pattern and the pattern I'll use for the cuff, that is a multiple of 4 stitches, we will want to divide them on the needles in multiples of 4. So I'm going to do 24 stitches on one needle, 20 stitches on the middle needle, and then 24 stitches on the last needle to give us 68. So to move the stitches, we're just going to slip them one by one onto our other needle. Just like this, carefully. The long tail cast on method makes this easier to do because you already have the base row there, keeping the stitches nice and stable. Okay, so I have 24 stitches on this needle. Now we're going to put 20 on our middle needle. In the same method. So now we have our stitches distributed, and you can see we can form a round, or it looks like a triangle, but you can see we can form kind of an endless loop to knit our sock with. Now here, I'm actually going to wrap my tail around this. This is called an end minder, and it basically just holds your tail for you, the tail of your yarn, so you don't accidentally knit with it, or it doesn't get stuck in your knitting. I find these really handy, especially when knitting in the round, and you have ample opportunity to accidentally knit with your tail. So we're just gonna put our tail like that, and that way we won't knit with it by accident. So we're going to set our needles up so that the working yarn is on the right side here, and we're going to be knitting off of this needle first because we're going to connect these. So I'm going to push the stitches up towards the tips of the needles. Now, one thing that's really important here is you're not going to want to twist the stitches, because otherwise it's going to be difficult to work in the round. So what that means is that you need to make sure this little ridge here goes all the way around in a straight line, and it's not like twisted or something strange like that. This can be a little hard to get the hang of, but once you do it a couple times, you start knowing what to look for. So we're going to begin in this stitch here. We're going to take our 4th needle and we're going to begin in knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, or 2x2 ribbing. So we're going to insert the needle in our first stitch to knit it. Our working yarn will be here, and we'll just knit. We're going to knit 2, and then purl 2. This first row will be the hardest probably. Knit 2. It'll get easier as you go. Purl 2. Knit 2. Purl 2. And we're going to do this all the way to the end of the stitches on this needle. So you can see kind of the needles are a little bit funky to work with if you're not used to it. But as the project goes, as the row count increases, this gets much easier to manage. So we'll finish out this row knitting 2 and purling 2. And then we'll move on to the next needle. And we're going to do the same thing here. Knit 2, purl 2, and that's the end of our second needle. Now we have our third needle. Need to get my little tail situation. There we go. We're going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to knit 2 and purl 2 all the way across the third needle. So our last purl 2, and now we're back at the start. So we're just gonna continue in this manner. We're back to our first needle. You'll see there's kind of a bigger gap because of the tail, but you can just pull that tight as you go, and that'll kind of eliminate that. You won't have that issue anymore after your first few rows. So now we're going to continue ribbing for, I usually like to do about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches of ribbing. I think in the case of the first sock that I knit, I did, I think 13, maybe 14 rows of ribbing. So we're going to match that in this sock so our socks can be identical. So every time you come to the end of your needle, you just move on to the next needle. You don't have to go back and forth, and that's the beauty of knitting in the round. You never have to switch directions, except when we're going to do the heel. You just knit around and around and around. So we're coming to the end of our ribbing, and next we're going to get ready to start on our pattern for the rest of the leg of our sock. So this was our last knit 2 purl 2 row. so you can see the cuff is shaped up quite nicely. I just want to briefly show what pattern I'm doing. So I'm going to be using the elongated corded rib pattern. It looks kind of like this, and as you can see, it's just really basic knit 2, purl 2, but then every other row you're going to decrease and yarn over, which is what makes the little lace pattern. So for the first row of this, we're going to begin by doing a slip, slip, knit. And this is just a left-leaning decrease, and then we're going to yarn over. Now, because we're yarning over before a purl stitch, we actually have to wrap the yarn twice because the yarn needs to be in front of the work for the purl stitch. So now we'll work our purl 2, and then we will repeat these 4 stitches across the round. So we'll do a slip, slip, knit those 2 together, yarn over, purl 2, slip, slip, knit, yarn over, purl 2, slip, slip, knit, yarn over, purl 2. And we're going to do this until the end of the row. So we're coming to the end of our first pattern round. We have one more set of 4 stitches to go. Okay. And so now we're going to knit 3 rounds even. And for this, even just means exactly like what we were doing for the cuff. So we're just going to do 3 rounds of knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So just knit 2, and here you're going to be knitting into your yarn over, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, for 3 whole rounds. So we're finishing up our 3rd even round. So our 3rd round of just knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. And now we're going to do our next pattern round. So our next pattern round, we're going to begin with a yarn over. So it's going to be essentially the opposite of the first pattern round. So we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to knit 2 together. So yarn over, knit 2 together, and then we purl 2. Now we yarn over, which the yarn is already in the front of the work from our purl, so we could just leave it there. Knit 2 together, then purl 2. Yarn over, so leave the yarn in front of the work, knit 2 together, if I can do that, purl 2, yarn over, knit 2 together, purl 2, and we're going to continue like this until the end of the round. So that is the end of our pattern round. this point, we're going to once again knit 3 rounds of knit 2, purl 2 regular. So just knit 2, purl 2. And once we've done that, that is our entire pattern. So we'll just repeat that again, over and over again, until the leg of our sock is the length that we want it to be. So I'd like to take this time to kind of discuss sizing and some things you can do to alter the size on your sock. Obviously, this sock is easily customizable. If you had a bigger foot, you could cast on more stitches. If you have a smaller foot, you can cast on fewer. For this particular pattern, it's a multiple of 4 stitches, so any number you cast on will want to be a multiple of 4. If you wanted to use something like 1 by 1 ribbing, so just knit 1, purl 1, you would have to cast on in a multiple of 2, any multiple of 2 stitches. If you wanted to knit some sort of 5-stitch pattern or 6-stitch pattern, you would just need to cast on the multiple of that stitch as your number of cast on stitches, but that can be altered. You can also alter your needle size to make your sock slightly bigger or smaller. Generally, if I'm knitting a men's sock, I'll knit on size 2 needles just to make things a little bigger. If I'm knitting a woman's sock, or depending on the pattern, I'll knit on size 1.5s or 1s. So that was our first even round. We're going to continue like that. So once we finish, our pattern will look like this, all down the cuff. So you can see how it's the yarn overs and the decreases combined with the purl rows. And for this particular sock, I made it, I think this is about 6 inches long. I usually make my legs about 6 or 7 inches long. If you want a shorter sock, you can absolutely make it shorter. So you would just knit the pattern for as long or as short as you want the leg to be. So now we can see that we've knitted to the bottom part of our leg. It's about the same length. It's actually exactly the same length as the leg on the finished sock. So now we're going to start our heel flap. So to start with the heel flap, I've divided the stitches on the needle so that we have half of the stitches on this one needle. That's 34 stitches, half of them here. And then the other half, the other 34 stitches, are split up between these 2 needles. And so the heel flap will be worked back and forth across just this one needle. So we're going to work it just across these 34 stitches. So we're going to do a slip stitch heel flap. So to do that, we're going to begin by slipping 1. We're going to always slip as if to purl. So slip 1. Let's get our working yarn here. So slip our first stitch, and then we're going to knit 1. And we're going to slip 1, knit 1. And we're going to slip 1, knit 1 across the entire row. So just alternating slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1. all across our 36 stitches. And we'll knit our last stitch. So that's the first row of our heel flap. And now we're going to turn the work around. So we're just going to leave these stitches on hold until we're ready to knit the foot. The heel is going to be knit entirely on this needle. So this is going to be a wrong side row. And because we're no longer knitting in the round, we're knitting just back and forth. We have right side rows and wrong side rows. So the wrong side row will be our purl row. We're going to begin this row also by slipping a stitch, and we do this because if you saw my last video with the sock techniques, slipping each side stitch is going to give us a nice base to pick up stitches into for the gusset of the sock. So we begin by slipping one as if to purl, and then we're going to purl across the entire row. So slip one and then purl to the end of the row, and that is our wrong side row for our heel flap. So now we've finished our first wrong side row. We're going to turn the work around once more, and we are going to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows as we did on this sock. So I completed, I'll have to look, I have it written down. I think I completed 36 rows here, so it would be 18 different repeats of each row. So each row 18 times. That's what I did here. Usually for sock patterns, you'll want to knit the heel flap to be about, I think 2 to 2.5 inches long. I know it works best for my particular foot, but you can, follow the pattern. If you have kind of a larger ankle, you might want to do a little bit longer of a heel flap. So this is about 2 inches and 36 rows. So that's what we're going to do here. So that was my first 2 rows. So now we're going to repeat those 2 rows 17 more times to give us a total of 36 rows. So we slipped 1, now we knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1. And we're going to do this all the way across. We will then turn our work, and then we will do the slip the edge stitch, and purl all the way across for our wrong side row. And we will just keep repeating that until our heel flap is finished. We are finishing up the last row on our heel flap. So this is our last purl row, our last wrong side row. We're just finishing purling to the end of the round, or the end of the row, sorry. Okay, just going to put that aside. And so now we have our heel flap. Let's take a look at it. My yarn is everywhere. So you can see we have a nice slip stitch heel flap. So you can see it actually looks a little like ribbing because every other stitch on the knit side is slipped. You can also see here we have these nice little edge stitches, and we have this on both sides because we slipped the beginning stitch of every row. So now we're going to knit the heel flap. Sorry, we're going to turn the heel. We've already knit the heel flap. Now we're going to turn the heel. So to do this, we're going to work some short rows. So if you watched my last tutorial, you'll know how to work short rows. So let's begin. We're going to slip the first stitch, just in keeping with the pattern that we've been doing. And now we're going to knit 18. Okay, so now we've slipped one, we've knit 18, and now we're going to knit 2 together. Knit 2 together. We're going to knit 1, and then we're going to turn our work around. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 stitches remaining. But we're going to turn our work. We're going to begin by slipping 1, and now we're going to purl 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to purl 2 together. So purl 2 together, complete a decrease, and then we're going to purl 1 and turn our work. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 stitches on this side as well, which is putting the center of our heel right in the middle. So now we've turned our work again. We're back to the knit side. We're going to slip 1, and we're going to knit 6. So we're going to knit 1 more stitch than we did on the previous row. And now you can see we have our little gap from our decrease that we completed. So when you get to 1 stitch before the gap, we're going to knit 2 together. This will close up our gap. We'll finish by knitting 1 and then turn our work once more. We'll begin by slipping 1, and then we're going to purl 7. So 1 more stitch than we did on the last row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And once again, you'll see we're 1 stitch before our gap. We're going to close the gap by purling 2 together, and then purling 1 to finish out the row. We're going to repeat in this fashion, slip 1, knit 8, until we have no more stitches left on the edges. You'll see what I mean. We're 1 stitch before the gap, so we're going to knit 2 together, close the gap, knit 1, slip 1, we're going to purl 10, or purl to 1 stitch before the gap if you can't remember how many you did on the previous round. The gap is a good way to tell where you are. Purl 2 together, purl 1, and turn. You can already see the heel is forming, so we're going to continue now in the same fashion. So we're coming to the last part of our heel turn. You can see we're 1 stitch before the gap and there's only 2 stitches remaining here. Knit 2 together to close our gap. Knit 1, and you'll see we're at the end of our row. We're going to do the wrong side row because we still have a gap at the other end. So slip 1. We're going to purl. All the way to our gap. So here's our gap. We're going to purl 2 together, close the gap, purl 1. We're going to once again turn our work, just because we want to be knitting the right side now. I'm going to untangle my yarn. Okay, so you can see our nice heel turn. Nice little place for your heel to go. And you can see we've decreased. We had 36 stitches before, and now we have 20. So we've decreased 16 stitches from 36 to 20 stitches. So now our next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up the stitches on the side of the heel. I'm actually going to set up for this by moving these all to 1 needle, just so I can give myself an extra needle to work with. So we're just going to slip these stitches over to 1 needle, just like this. This isn't completely necessary, I just like to do it, I find it easier. Okay, so now, again, if you watched my last video on picking up stitches, it'll give you a clear idea of how to do it. But we're basically going to pick up, my lighting isn't very good, sorry. We're going to pick up 1 stitch in each little V. It's easy to see with this yarn because the V's are each a different color, just because of the way this yarn stripes. So, in order to pick up these stitches, first we're going to have to knit across the bottom of our heel. We're going to still slip this edge stitch, so slip this one. We're going to knit, just knit 19 stitches across. Now your heel turn might be different based on how many stitches you have. There's all sorts of like calculators online that you can do to figure out, you can use to figure out how many stitches you need for each different part of the heel. It's not necessarily going to be the same number that I showed you. Okay, so now we're going to pick up into each one of these V's. So it's pretty easy to see because each one's a different color. We have, you know, purple, yellow, green, whatever. So we're going to start in the top one, which is this kind of brownish color one. We're going to insert our needle into the stitch and knit it. Just bring the yarn around and knit. So you're going to pull up a loop onto your needle. This is just creating stitches where there are currently no live stitches. So let's insert our needle under our second V and knit the stitch. Under the third V and knit the stitch. Oops. Under the fourth V, knit the stitch. under the 5th V, knit the stitch. Oops. We're going to do this down the whole row. So if you remember, we had 18 rows on our heel flap. So we're going to do this 18 times. Okay, and here's our last V. So I've picked up 18 stitches here, and then I actually like to pick up an additional stitch in this little gap here, just because otherwise sometimes it gets to be a hole. So I usually pick up kind of in here. We're actually going to pick up just like this, and then I like twisting it just to really close the gap. So I'll knit through the back loop here. Okay, so now we have 19 stitches on this needle. At this point, this is why we moved all of these stitches to the same needle, because we're going to take our needle and we're going to knit across this this needle. Now, some people like just a plain stockinette stitch foot, so not to continue this pattern, so your foot would just look like this with the plain stockinette. But as you saw with the other sock, I continued with the pattern on the top of the foot, so we're going to knit across the pattern now. And you just have to remember to begin where you left off in the pattern, so just keep a note of that. So I left off on an even round, so it's just going to be knit 2, purl 2, rimming across, and I'm actually starting with the purl 2. So you have the purl 2 here. So we're just going to purl 2, knit 2, all across this next needle, keeping with our pattern since we're going to continue in the pattern for the top of the foot. And our final 2 stitches are purl stitches. Okay. And now we're going to pick up stitches along this side. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to pick up 18 stitches in our little V's here, but we're going to begin by picking up 1 in the corner. So we're going to pick up in the corner here, knit, and then we're going to pick up in each little V. 1, oh my gosh, keep splitting my yarn. 2, 3, 4. So you can see I'm inserting the needle right under the V. So we're going to do this until we get to the end of the heel flap. And here's our last stitch to pick up. And now you can see we're about ready to knit in the round again. So for the foot of our sock, we're going to make the beginning of our round the middle of the heel. So that means we're actually going to knit 10 stitches from here, so half of these stitches onto this needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the remaining 10 stitches here are going to go on this needle. We'll just slip them there so that we can use this needle to knit with. So we'll just slip them onto this needle. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now we're ready to work the gusset. So for the gusset, let me show you. You can see we have a lot of stitches on our needle now. It's pretty wide because we ended here with our heel. Well, I guess it kind of goes this way, right? And you can see here, we're decreasing. We're just going to decrease down so that we have 68 stitches, or whatever the number of stitches you started with, or whatever the number of stitches you want for your foot. So we're going to decrease every other row until we have the correct number of stitches again on our needle, and then we will continue even for the rest of the foot. So to do this, we're going to keep the bottom of our foot in stockinette stitch, and we'll just do the pattern for the top. So we're going to knit on this first needle, just regular knit stitch, plain stockinette stitch. We're going to knit until the last 3 stitches of the needle. This is going to take a while because we do have a lot of stitches on our needle right now. If you remember, we picked up 19 stitches on the side, and then we added 10 from the top of the foot, so we have 29 stitches right now for just this side of the foot. Okay, so I have 3 stitches left, and at this point I'm going to knit 2 together. So I'm going to do a slanted decrease, knit 2 together, and then knit 1. Now we've come to the top of the foot, and I'm just going to continue knitting in the pattern. So right now we're still on an even round, so we're going to purl 2, knit 2 all the way across, okay. So now we've come to the other side of the foot, and we're going to do a decrease here as well on the edge. So we're going to knit 1, and then we're going to do a slanted decrease. So we're going to slip, slip, knit, because we want to slant the other direction. Slip, slip, knit, and then we will knit to the end of the needle. Again, this is going to be a great number of stitches. So right now for our foot, we have decreased a couple, but we have, I think, about 56 stitches on the bottom of our foot, and we want to have 36, which is half of the number we started with. So we're going to decrease 10 more times, because we're decreasing 20 stitches, and we're decreasing 2 stitches each time we decrease. So we're going to do this 20 more times. So we're going to decrease every other round. So at this point we're going to knit 1 round even, or 1 round without decreasing, And then after that, we will knit around with the decrease, just like we did this time. So this is our even round. And then after this, we will knit a decrease round. And we will repeat those 2 rounds, always keeping the top of our foot in the designated pattern. We're going to repeat those 2 rounds until we have 68 stitches remaining for the sock, or 68, or 34 for the top and 34 for the foot. So we already have 34 on the top. We just need to get it down to 34 here. So we are currently finishing the last row of our foot. So this is the last number of stitches for the straight knitting we were doing without increasing or decreasing on our foot. And now we're back at the beginning of our round, which is the middle of our foot, and we're ready to decrease for the toe. So you can see how nicely our sock is shaped up. And you can see that it's almost the same length as this sock. I've done the exact same number of pattern rows. That's how I counted it. I did 38 pattern rows. 38 full pattern repeats in the sock. And so now I've done 38 full pattern repeats here. The toe, you will generally want to start about 1.5 to 2 inches before the total length that you want your sock to be. Because the toe itself, I'll show you. See here. It's going to be about, depending on exactly how you do it, 1.5 to 2 inches in length. This is about 1.5. So now we're going to begin decreasing for our toe. So I have it set up, as you know, half of my stitches, 34 stitches, are on this needle. And then I have 17 each on this needle, so that's 34 total. So we're going to decrease in the corners here, 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 and here. And we're going to decrease every other round. So every other round, we will decrease by 4 stitches. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit until 3 stitches before the end of our round. So that means right now I'm knitting 14 stitches. So I've come to 3 stitches before the end of my round, and now I'm going to knit 2 together and then knit 1. Moving on to our next needle, I'm going to begin by knitting 1. We are no longer going to work in the pattern. We're going to work our toe simply in stockinette stitch. So knit 1. We're going to slip, slip, knit. So slip 1, slip the other, and then knit these 2 stitches together. And then we're going to knit until the last 3 stitches of this needle. So we have 34 stitches, or now 33 because we just decreased 1. So we have 33 stitches on this needle. We're going to knit across 30 of them. until we get to the point where there are 3 stitches remaining, which is right here. And now we're going to knit 2 together again. And then knit 1 to finish the needle. Moving on to our third and final needle, we're going to begin by knitting 1, and then we will slip, slip, knit, and then knit to the end of the needle. So as you can see, we've completed 4 decreases. So we have 4 stitches decreased. I began with 68 stitches, and now I've decreased to 64 stitches. For our next round, we're going to work 1 even round. An even round means that we're just going to knit. We are not going to complete any decreases on this round. It'll be just pure knitting. So we're going to knit across 64 stitches. We're coming to the end of our even round where we did not decrease. In the next round we are going to complete once more 4 decreases. So what we're doing is we're knitting these 2 rows, your decrease row or your round, we're knitting in the round. You're going to knit your decrease round followed by an even round over and over again. So right now we're going to decrease. So on our first needle we're going to knit until 3 stitches remain. 1, 2, 3. We're going to knit 2 together and knit 1, and we've decreased once more. Our second needle, we're going to knit 1, slip, slip, knit, and then we're going to knit until 3 stitches remain. Now 3 stitches are remaining. We're going to knit 2 together, knit 1. Next needle, we're going to knit 1, slip, slip, knit, and then knit to the end of the row. And now we've decreased another 4 stitches, so now we have 60 stitches on our needle. So you can kind of begin to see the toe starting to form. We've only done 2 decrease rows, so you can't really tell yet. After this we're going to complete an even round, and you're going to continue completing those 2 rounds, so a decrease round and then an even round. Okay, at this point we have 40 stitches remaining on our needles, 20 here and 10 on each of these needles. So you can see our decreases are making a nice toe on our sock. So at this point we're going to continue with our decrease rows, but we are not going to knit an even row in between. So we're going to decrease every single row. We're going to do it in the same fashion. So you knit until there's 3 stitches remaining. Knit 2 together. Knit 1. Knit 1. Slip, slip, knit. Knit until you have 3 stitches remaining. It takes a lot less time now that we only have 20 stitches on our needle instead of 34. Knit 2 together, knit 1. And our final needle, we're going to knit 1, slip, slip, knit, and knit to the end of the needle and the end of the round. So now we're going to do that again. So we're not going to knit an even row now, we're just going to continue decreasing. And you're going to do this, knit, decrease rows consistently until we have 20 stitches remaining on the needles. So we'll have 10 stitches here, 5 stitches here, and 5 stitches here. So complete these decrease rows, decreasing 4 stitches every round until you have only 20 stitches remaining on your needles. So I'm currently finishing my last decrease round. And now you can see we have our nice toe, and I have 20 stitches remaining. I have 10 stitches here and then 5 stitches on each of these needles. We're not going to need that needle anymore, so we can put it to the side. And what we're going to do is we're going to knit these 5 stitches onto this needle so that we're in a position where we can graft our toe together. So we're just going to knit these 5 stitches. And now we can put this needle to the side as well. So now you can see we have 10 stitches on each needle, and they're just kind of facing one another. We can bring them together for our toe. So it really looks like a sock now. So the final step is going to be grafting, which we'll use Kitchener stitch for. So we're going to go ahead and cut a tail. We can put our yarn away. And we're going to use our darning needle or a yarn needle. I have several different sizes. I think for the sock we're going to use this little one. So I'll put the rest of these away for now. So here we have our darning needle. And if you saw my last video, we went over how to do Kitchener stitch in that video. It's going to be the same thing here. We're going to thread the yarn, through our darning needle, and then we're going to use Kitchener stitch to graft the toe together, so it'll end up looking like a seamless, I'll show you the other sock. It'll end up looking fairly seamless. You can barely tell. It just kind of looks like straight stockinette stitch. So for Kitchener stitch, we're going to begin by putting the yarn needle or the darning needle through the top stitch on the front needle. So this is our front needle, and this will be our back needle for the purposes of this demonstration. So the front needle, the one closest to me, we're going to stick the yarn needle up through the stitch like you're going to knit it. We're going to slip that stitch off the needle and pull our yarn through. We're going to then put our yarn needle through the next stitch on the same front needle, but we're going to do it as if to purl. So we're going to stick the needle down through the stitch. We're going to pull it through, but we're going to leave the stitch on the needle. Then we're going to begin with the back needle. So we're going to put the darning needle through the top stitch on the needle as if to purl. So down through the stitch, and we're going to remove it from the needle and pull through. Then we're going to insert the darning needle onto the next stitch on the back needle, up as if to knit. So up through the stitch, and it's going to remain on the needle. And we're going to do that again until we don't have any stitches left. So, front needle, put the darning needle through as if to knit, and slip the stitch off the needle. Pull. Put the darning needle through the next stitch on the front needle as if to pull, as if to purl, sorry, and leave the stitch on the needle. Moving to our back needle, we're going to put the darning needle through as if to purl and remove the stitch from the needle. Then we're going to put the darning needle through the next stitch on the back needle as if to knit, and we're going to leave that stitch on the needle. Let's repeat it again. Front needle as if to knit, remove it from the needle. Front needle as if to purl, leave it on the needle. Back needle as if to purl, remove it from the needle. Back needle as if to knit, leave it on the needle. Front needle as if to knit, remove the stitch. Front needle as if to purl, leave the stitch on the needle. Back needle as if to purl, remove the stitch. Back needle as if to knit, leave the stitch on. Let's do one more together. Front stitch as if, or front needle as if to knit, remove it. Front needle as if to purl, leave it on the needle. Back needle as if to purl, remove the stitch. Back needle as if to knit, leave it on. So we're going to continue this until the end of our round. The end of our stitches, sorry. Okay, so we've come to the final two stitches on our front needle and back needle. We're just going to finish it by inserting our needle through the front stitch, the stitch in the front needle as if to knit, and removing it from the needle. We can put away that needle. My yarn fell out of its darning needle, which is unfortunate. I'm going to have to rethread it. Give me a second. Oh my god. Okay. And then we're going to insert through the remaining stitch as if to purl and remove it from the needle. Now we're done with all of our needles. And you can see our nice seamless Kitchener stitch. Looks really good. So at this point, the only thing that remains for us to do is to weave in our yarn ends. I like to kind of stick this through here. And then I'm going to turn the sock inside out. And now we can weave in our yarn ends here. Now you can do this however you prefer. Different people have different ideas of how they like to weave in yarn ends. I just kind of like to go through the stitches just kind of like this. I don't know if you can really see what I'm doing, but I'm just kind of going up and down. So you can see we have these little like purl rows. I just like going up and down those rows to weave in our ends. And that way your sock isn't going to unravel. So when you wear it or when you wash it, your ends will be nice and sewn in, and they won't unravel your entire sock, which would be very tragic. Okay, so I think we're done here. And then you can cut. And you can weave in the other end of the sock yarn as well. I'll do that later. So now we have this nice sock we've created. And in fact, we have two of them. So we have a pair of socks that we can wear to keep our feet nice and warm in the winter. I do machine wash all of my socks because I think it's a little silly to hand wash socks. I just machine wash them in cold water and I let them air dry. So I dry them either outside on a clothesline or on a drying rack. So these socks are kind of fun. You can see each of them is a little different just because of the way the yarn has striped. The yarn is striped a little differently in each one, which I find kind of fun. So that's the beauty of hand-knitted socks. They're not going to be exactly the same, but they will fit your feet perfectly if you make them to fit your feet perfectly. They make a nice gift. They're very warm in the winter. I think they're very stylish. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it empowers you to make your own socks. And if you like these tutorials and you have a specific tutorial or specific technique or project that you would like to see, please let me know in the comments and I will see about doing a tutorial for that. And otherwise, I hope you all have a great evening or day or night, and I will see you next time. Bye.